All right, we're going to get right into it. I'm going to use a little bit of visual aid today to help you guys out a little bit. This just, came into my head, and I thought I would share with you because it just makes perfect sense, okay? So I'm going to give you guys some great information in this video. Don't go anywhere. But first, I want you to imagine this is the year 1992. While you're looking at this tree represents 1992, okay? That tree represents 1992.
Is known, presents us with an opportunity to follow up on the important work of the Earth Summit to develop its blueprint, Agenda 21, for global environmental action. HCON Res 353 outlines a comprehensive national strategy for sustainable development in accordance with the principles of Agenda 21 to be coordinated under the leadership of a specific office and at the direction of a high-level government official. The resolution also urges the United States to identify and initiate further agreements to protect the global environment and to support the creation of a high-level United Nations Sustainable Development Commission headed by an Undersecretary General. Third and lastly, the President is urged to report to Congress on the progress made on with this action. HCON Res 353 is supported by the administration. I have been in contact with the appropriate offices of the State Department and have incorporated their suggestions into the resolution. The 71 co-sponsors in of this measure include one-half the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee and all of the House delegates to the Earth Summit. It is also supported by the major United States non-governmental organizations
NGO
concerned with the environmental issues. The Earth Summit presented world leaders with an opportunity that should not be lost. We must now embark on a new course that will sustain our planet and its resources for the benefit of future generations. This resolution calls on the United States to assert its leadership to achieve this goal. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution. Thanks again to the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee for their recognition of the importance and timeliness of this resolution. We must make the promise of Rio a reality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
In 1992, Henry Lamb was trying to warn people about the agenda. Okay, I've been trying to let you guys know that there's actually an agenda taking place, and they don't really care if you like it or not, even if you're in America with the Constitution and everything. But he tried to warn everybody about Agenda 21, that the United Nations and everybody else had settled on this, and they were putting it into place. Roll the tape.
On the radio and in audiences like this, Mr. Lamb, there's no such thing as a global agenda. Hey, friend, you're absolutely wrong. Here it is. It's called Agenda 21. Agenda 21, the primary document presented in Rio de Janeiro and adopted by more than 100 heads of state, including George Bush, which lays out in intricate detail all of the transformation that must take place in society in order for it to become sustainable as they define sustainability. This may be available at the United Nations bookstore. I had to pick this up. I had not seen one until last July, had not been able to get one. I happened to be in Geneva attending a United Nations meeting, and I went to the bookstore and bought the thing. So the parties held its first meeting in Nassau last December. At that first meeting, the United Nations Environment Program presented them with a global biodiversity assessment. Started in 1992 with a grant from the Global Environment Facility for $3.3 million, orchestrated and coordinated by the World Resources Institute and the World Wildlife Fund and the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. This is 1,140 pages that explains how to implement the 16-page treaty on biodiversity. The last 200 pages, section 13, deals specifically with a system of protected areas. It defines what a system of protected areas is. It includes core wilderness areas, surrounded by buffer zones, similar to those used in the biosphere reserves, created under a UNESCO program and promoted by the United States Man in the Biosphere program. There are 382 biosphere reserves around the world, 47 of which are in the United States, not under authority of any treaty, but by voluntary agreement with the United Nations. These biosphere reserves are to be the nucleus for the core wilderness area. Scratching my head here, what on earth is going on? And then I stumbled on page 993, and friends, if you don't think that's some heavy reading at night, page 993, after describing these protected areas, sums it all up by saying, the recently published Wildlands Project in the United States is the central theme of protected area. And on page 15 of the Wildlands Project, Dr. Reed Noss says that we must convert at least 50% of the land area of North America to wilderness, off limits to human beings. Those core wilderness areas are to be interconnected by wilderness corridors off limits to human beings. Those wilderness areas are to be surrounded by buffer zones that may have limited resource use under the supervision and permitting of the federal government, in collaboration with non-government organizations. Human population to be resettled into the remaining 25% of the land, into communities that are described as sustainable communities. Now let me put a parenthesis right here for a moment. He created what he called a White House task force on ecosystem management. He called 20 federal departments together and said, you will create an ecosystem management policy, and you will implement the ecosystem management policy throughout the federal government, Department of Interior, Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, Department of Education, throughout the federal government. They developed what they called multimedia enforcement. Where they run into a problem with a community that will not accept this ecosystem management concept, multimedia enforcement means that all 20 federal agencies descend on the community and begin inspections and writing tickets. I couldn't believe it.
The document calls for literally reducing the human population by as much as 2/3 to 3/4 in the next 30 to 50 years. It could set aside up to 1/2 of the American landscape into wilderness areas interconnected by wilderness corridors, all surrounded by human buffer zones in which human activities are highly regulated. That is very, very clear in these United Nations documents that they want to set up a regulatory structure that would affect every man, woman, and child on planet Earth, and all of the control would be headquartered in the United Nations. And if we take the more recent United Nations documents, it's going to be called the Trusteeship Council in the restructure of the United Nations that's occurring right now. And the Man of the Biosphere program, as revealed in the U.S. State Department documents as well as UNESCO documents, clearly show that the Man of the Biosphere program actually is the first step in implementing the Convention on Biological Diversity. And there are 47 of these Man of the Biosphere programs around this nation that occupy about 51 million acres of U.S. soil.
World Heritage Sites are many of our national parks. In fact, 68% of our national parks land base is now under UNESCO's World Heritage Site. And that includes the symbol of independence in America, the Independence Hall, the Statue of Liberty, Yellowstone National Park, Monticello, Carlsbad Caverns, and the American people didn't even realize this was happening.
This is 2024. It's a great illustration. If you let those little baby trees go without getting them addressed, they're going to cause you damage. This one's going to rip out my fence if I don't get it cut. So I thought that was a great analogy, that in 1992, it was just a baby starting out. And in 2024, we're going to have to deal with it. I got my new reading material because I just don't want to take anybody's word for anything. I've got this reading material. I'm going to be diving into it and letting you know what I find. But I'm unfortunately